Good afternoon. My name is Natalia de Estevan, and I'm the EMCC UK Director for Knowledge Exchange. And it's my pleasure to host this this webinar today with Charly and Zoe. This is the third webinar that we run in the Coaching and Climate series, and we've had a wonderful experience so far. So welcome to some of you who have been perhaps in the other two. And for me, there is very little to say other than a little bit on the Zoom protocol that we follow. This is a session that is recorded, and we would be making this available to members of the EMCC UK and non-members within the next 48 hours. And you'll find it as a clickable resource in the front banner of EMCC UK website. And there's just nothing else for me to say than welcome to everybody, and I'm going to hand over to Charly and Zoe.
Thank you so much, Natalia. I really appreciate it. And hi, everyone. Really wonderful that you could be here. So as Natalia said, this is the third in the series, and thank you so much to EMCC UK in hosting these climate and coaching series, the third of 5. And the two that have been completed so far in March and April are still available to download together with the slides and resources on the EMCC website. The first was a presentation session on the underlying science on climate and ecological breakdown, and a conversation around that together with the climate conscious coaching model that I've developed last year. Peter Hawkins talking about moving from kind of eco-curious to eco-active, and a conversation around that. So I'm delighted that continuing on our climate and coaching journey together, this is the third of our 5 conversations, and really, really delighted to have Charly here. Hello, Charly.
Hello, thank you.
Hi, lovely to see you. I guess that's probably a little bit of the theme of this conversation. We're going to be talking about our journeys to how we got where we are and where we might be going from here, both in a personal way to start off with, and then very much opening out to allow you with each other to have that conversation about where you are in your journeys and what are the next steps that you'd like to take as coaches, connecting with the climate agenda and related work in your life. Charly, do you want to introduce yourself, if that's okay?
Yeah, sure. Thank you, Zoe, first of all, for inviting me to do this with you, and thanks to the EMCC for not only hosting this, but also for making this open source subsequent to this course. It's really, really brilliant. So my name's Charly Cox. I live in Oxford, and so I'm pleased to see Marion from Blueberry, because that feels like it's just down the road, but also some other faces on this call that I recognise from various places. I'm the founder of the Climate Change Coaches, which is an organisation which is looking to change mindsets around climate crisis. So to help people to feel more capable, more powerful, more positive, and more like they can do something. And we run training for coaches, and we're building a training course for non-coaches, put those coaching skills into the hands of people who want to create climate action in the world. And if you like, we're working on the piece of the puzzle, which is about the psychology of climate change more than it is the technical side. So addressing the emotional dissonance, which is stopping many of us, all of us, I'd like to say, at one point or another, getting into action, feeling good about that action. And I am also, I should say, I'm 31 weeks pregnant. And so you're in no danger, you're perfectly safe. But none of you are going to have to become an impromptu midwife. But if I sort of shuffle about a bit, that might be the reason. And I live in Oxford, and I have a 4-year-old daughter and a husband who is a clinical psychologist and a sleep specialist. So it's a bundle of laughs at the moment, noticing our quarantine dreams, as we're told they're called, and what they might mean. Because I don't know about you, but we're all having very vivid dreams over here. So that's me.
Thank you, Charly. I think people may notice that I'm swishing about a bit more than normal. I've managed to do myself a quarantine hamstring injury, so I can't, sitting comfortably is not a thing I can do very much at the moment, which doesn't sit well with Zooms, long Zoom periods. So I tend to be fidgeting more than normal, but I am listening, I'm just fidgeting. Thanks, Charlie. So this is going to be a really flowing, informal session, and very much kind of just connected to human stories and us as people and as coaches. So not thinking so much technically, not thinking so much on a technique basis. Those things we're going to come a bit more to in the fourth session. Linda, Aspey and I are going to sort of touch on really some practical things in the coaching room itself. Not that we're experts on that, because this is a massively developing area, but we'll talk about that in our next session. And then the fifth session is with Alison Whybrow on regenerative coaching. So we've got different themes each time. For today, it's really about our stories and our journeys, and kind of we wanted to start, Charlie and I wanted to start with just maybe 10-15 minutes or so exploring each other's journeys, what's brought us to where we are now, how we are as individuals and as coaches responding to the reality we find ourselves in. Because there's, just as this lockdown period is manifesting itself differently for everyone, everyone's having their own personal pandemic in their own way. There's similarly different for all of us as coaches responding to the climate and ecological emergency. There's a myriad of ways to respond, and there's no one right way. So I guess at heart, we wanted to share our stories as two examples of our responses, just to illustrate actually there's a myriad of different ways to respond, and a myriad of ways in, and a myriad of next steps, because there isn't a single answer. So I guess, do you want to go first, Charlie, say a little bit about your journey and the steps and inspirations that led you to be here? Is that okay?
Yeah, that's okay. And stop me if I go on, because I can make it short or long.
Medium.
I think I'm not an environmentalist by training. I didn't have a sustainability background. My background, if any crossover existed, was that I'd worked in international development for Save the Children, and I lived in West Africa for 7 years, and I ran a business over in Sierra Leone. I built a business there. So I probably identified more with the business community than I did with the development community. And I did a lot of work with people who were socially motivated, and everything felt like it was about humans and social, not much about environment. And I probably did care about the environment when I was a teenager, but there was a point in time when it almost felt like that wasn't the bigger need anymore. And I've subsequently read that there was a bit of a media shift around the time that I was around 20, where we were sort of refocused towards social inequality, away from climate, away from the environment, as it would then have been called. So all of that is to say that when I had my daughter 4 years ago, I woke up and thought, oh my God, climate change. And I had no resources to fall back on. I had no professional experience. I had no networks, nothing, but I knew I wanted to do something. And when I first started talking to colleagues in coaching, unfortunately, because I wasn't very skillful, because I was probably very threatened and frightened, their immediate response was to tell me I wasn't allowed to do it, because it sounded, and it probably did sound, like I had an agenda. And I wanted to force it on everybody and make everybody as frightened as I was about climate change. And so I probably stalled for about 2 years. And in that time, I told my existing clients that I wanted to work on climate change and environmental sustainability. And so they, wonderful people that they were, sent me clients from those kind of sectors and whose missions were in those places. And so I was doing it behind the scenes, but I wasn't talking about it, because talking about it publicly seemed really scary. And I think I learned something about the fact that as coaches, we're pretty rubbish at marketing, because what we don't like doing is saying, I do this, and therefore I don't do this. And it felt really scary to say, I don't do this anymore. And in this was probably a whole bunch of stuff that wasn't very purposeful or very exciting, that probably took me into places that probably paid well, but didn't really light me up. And it took a lot of courage to move away from that. So I spent about a year with a very long-suffering web designer redesigning a website. And at the 11th hour, she said, oh, I noticed your logo doesn't say climate change coach. Should we just change that? And before I could stop myself, I said yes. And so that went up on the website. And I didn't really know what climate change coach was. I don't think anyone had called themselves that in our context of coaching anyway. and off it went. And within 24 hours, people were ringing me and saying, oh, could you write me a blog? And could you come and talk on this podcast? And I felt like a bit of an idiot, really, because I probably should have done that 2 years earlier. And so I guess the sort of message I want you to take from my story is don't wait. Don't let your doubt tell you that you can't if you don't have all the, the kind of the knowledge, expertise, credentials. What I've learned is, you need to do what you do and you love doing. And for me, that's coaching and training. And there is a way to apply what we do in this space. And so I would love people to start to think about how their purpose and their skills overlay into the climate crisis. And I think what's happened in the time since that transition for me is things like 2019 was pretty game changing in terms of Fridays for the Future and Extinction Rebellion and Greta Thunberg as a phenomenon all of her own right have made this everybody's problem in a way that it probably felt more niche previously. And so what I find now is I have clients finding me in my private practice and saying, so I do this, and it's an old world skill, like marketing, let's pick marketing. How can I do that over here to do something useful for the climate crisis? And I really fundamentally believe that everyone can find a place. It's just what that place is. And it's about doing the journey and the process to work it out. It's not that there is, as Zoe said, a way of doing it or one size fits all. It's just about spending the time thinking about how it applies.
That's really lovely. Thanks, Charlie. And I wholeheartedly agree that everyone can find their place in this journey, whether they're a coach or a whatever. I guess it'd be really, would you mind saying a little bit about the ways in which you have and now do apply your coaching skills and coaching knowledge to this agenda? Just unpack that a little bit before I kind of pick up the baton.
So I suppose I used to be a photographer. So the first thing I noticed was there were no people in most of the pictures about climate change. And that struck me as odd. And it took me a long time to be able to decouple this idea of the environment over there and us over here, or to couple them up actually again, rather than not decouple them, and to realize that this is a human problem. This is not a climate problem. It's not an environmental problem. It's a human problem. It's a consumption problem, to be really reductive about it. And that for me was just the best news ever, because as coaches, we work on human problems all the time. And it felt like a behavior change issue at an individual level, and it felt like a change management issue at an organizational level, and then a systems change problem. So I guess what in very concrete terms I do is, in my private practice, I still coach 2 days a week. I coach coaches and I coach non-coaches, probably more of them than coaches. And there I'm helping people who are already in it to stay in it, to look after themselves and make sense of things. But I'm also helping people get on the pitch who are standing on the outside. And I'm noticing I'm getting a lot of new parents, for example, at a time when they'd probably be justified in just hunkering down and changing nappies. They're ringing up and saying, everything's got to change. And where I thought I would be helping people with career change, I'm actually helping with whole life change, because they don't just want to change their job, they want to actually do something fundamental. So I suppose there's a really obvious application, and I'm not doing anything different in a way. I'm coaching using broadly the same skills. But what I have learned there, we have built into the climate change coaches, which is a team of 8 of us. And in our training programs, we're basically helping people work with 2 big fears. And I think this is where coaching and climate coaching, if you like, are slightly nuanced, in that when someone comes to you to change career, they'll often say, I don't think I can get a new job. I haven't got the right CV. I'm too old, or I'm too young, or I'm too inexperienced, or I'm overqualified, or they'll come up with all of the doubts that mean they're not moving forward. But what they will never say is, I don't believe that anyone can get a new job. You know, they'll say, well, other people can get a new job, sure, but I can't. But when it comes to climate crisis, what you often hear is both of those things happening. So I don't believe I can do it, and I don't believe humankind can pull this off. And so the skills I guess I've had to learn and take what we were all trained in as coaches and then develop is, how do you help people with that existential crisis and that feeling of lack of trust and faith in our collective systemic ability to solve this. And again, it's not dramatically different coaching skills actually, but I have had to do quite a lot of thinking, and so have the team, to be able to build training courses. And we're now writing a book for McGraw-Hill, which is all about this and about how you can take essentially coaching skills and apply them. And I guess the only last thing I'd say, I don't know if I'm really answering the questions over, but the last thing I'd say,
definitely.
I think our theory of change has evolved quite a bit. And it probably looks a bit like this, you know, that there's an individual level at which we can change individually. And really that's about mindset, because the mindset then leads to behavior change, which is great. We've all got to change our individual behavior. But what that also does is it makes us inspiring, positive, capable sounding people who are attractive to others, if you like. And that's not to say if you're deeply grieving that you should buck up your ideas and put a smile on. I'm not trying to say that at all. But when we can stand in an empowered place around these big challenges, and coronavirus is another one, then we naturally draw people to want to get involved with us and involved with it, whatever that challenge is. And then we can connect better together. And if we connect better together, we shift systems. So, you know, we often focus on people like Greta Thunberg because she's just incredible. And she would just be a little girl sitting outside the Swedish parliament if millions of people hadn't come with her. And so we don't really see the millions of people, we just see her. We say, isn't she amazing? Well, she is. She's amazing for the fact that she's moved a whole body of people with her. And that body of people will change the system, not her on her own. And so it's like, for us, it's about, everything's about being in relationship, because if you're in relationship with other people and with climate crisis and with the planet, then you're able to influence and make change. And so often what we're finding ourselves doing with non-coaches is de-triggering some of the angst and the anger and the scarcity that arises from the crisis, that they're inadvertently putting into their relationships, which is that kind of aggressive agenda stuff. And that won't necessarily change as many minds as fast as they need to. Is that
wow, thanks, Charlie. Yeah, it's wow. And I guess one thing I'm noticing, and I'd reflect on and tell my own story in a few minutes before we open out for everyone to contribute and discuss, is actually this isn't the journey that we go on, obviously in life per se, but with this whole agenda, because of the scale and the nature of it, it's not entirely linear. It's not linear, is it? It's wiggly. And it isn't linear in any way, in that we do twists and turns, and we do fast bits, slow bits, and then we go back again and do that bit again, because like, okay, now I've worked that out. That isn't what I thought it was. And, you know, I know my journey over the last 18 months, 2 years has been full of twists and turns. You know, I've had every metaphor going, I think, in terms of the story. But I think I'll pick up the baton just a little bit brief for a few minutes, if that's all right, on connecting in with purpose. I think for me it was a real, I was going to say crisis of purpose, but it's not quite right, but which really was kicking in when I was caring for my mum when she was very poorly before she died. And I knew, you know, I was grieving for her way before she actually died, just as I've been grieving for the loss of nature since I was a kid, really, since I really understood what humans were doing to the earth. I committed to myself in Mum's last days that when, bless her, she did finally go, I was going to commit the rest of my days of breathing to making as big a difference as possible in terms of the planet and sustainability and that agenda that was most closest to my heart. I just didn't know exactly what that was. Having spent thousands of hours volunteering over much, on and off much of my adult life, with gaps when my daughter was little and gaps when career was just too full on to do anything and that kind of thing. But on and off for many years, spending thousands of hours volunteering. Latterly, the biggest commitment to that was chairing a community energy company where I live, where we spent a huge amount of time over 3 years running 2 share offers to raise £200,000 to put solar panels on 4 local schools, which took a lot of energy. I did that for about 3.5 years as the founding chair of that little board of volunteers, and a great community project. And at the same time, I knew in my heart of hearts when it was going on that actually, although it was great, it was a drop in the ocean. And I knew that, really. So when my mum's death sort of was end of August, which was just before the IPCC report came out, the report that Greta sort of particularly picked up on and said, we've got 12 years to save the planet. Of course, we've got 10.5 now because we've 18 months has gone. That galvanized me, but I very much connected with my purpose. But I had lots and lots of conversations and searching, and felt like I was in a kayak. I don't know if anyone's ever done any kayaking, but if you have done any kayaking, you know that moment where you're kayaking along, and if you're me kayaking, you get distracted by something pretty to look at, and you start looking over to the side, and before you know it, you're kayaking over there, and you're not going in a straight line at all. You're just going all over the place. I could not get my kayak to go in a straight line because I didn't know where I was looking. I didn't know the direction I was looking in to be able to kayak towards it. And I spent probably 3, 4, 5 months kayaking around in blooming circles in all different directions to just absolutely connect. And sometimes I'm still fine tuning my kayak now, because I don't think that's ever going to stop. I'm perpetually asking myself, how can I make the most impact? Is what I'm doing making the most impact? Can I do something differently? And that's me as a person as well as me as a coach. Every aspect of my life, professionally and personally, in terms of this agenda, because that's my passion and purpose drives me to do that. And I think, I'm sure many of us as coaches do work with individuals and teams and organisations around purpose. And in a sense, it's no different, as it's connecting with what is our purpose in relation to this. How can we bring the passions and skills and strengths that we've got to this agenda? And because we're all unique, that's going to be different for all of us. I know that, and I've learned over time, and as I've got older, I think it's helped because I don't care so much what people think of me. One of the benefit of grey hair is although it connects to how I know myself, even going back to being a kid, I think I've got more passionate about it as time's gone on, is truth telling. I am deeply, deeply passionate about truth telling. So I suppose it's in part a coaching skill and links back to my skills in my earlier career of being a director in the NHS, of being able to speak to lots of people and lots of audiences and all that kind of stuff. But actually speaking frankly and speaking from the heart and speaking one's truth, I think potentially we get strong at that as coaches, don't we? Because we actually name stuff. That's what we do. We name stuff and we say it to people quite often where they're actually quite powerful, or groups that are quite powerful. So kind of leaning into that and embracing that desire and will and hopefully skill to tell the truth to all sorts of audiences really speaks to my own passion. And so I guess for me, it's putting my head above the parapet and saying, this is me, this is what I believe in, not because it's about me, but because actually I want to be a voice that adds to the voices for change. So I guess that's when thinking about journeys and about purpose and about identity, I am an activist. I see myself as an activist. It's a core part of me. And for me personally, my journey has been about bringing developing and growing and nurturing my activism and bringing it into my coaching, but also bringing coaching into activism. You know, and activism comes in lots of shapes and sizes. It isn't all about Extinction Rebellion and getting arrested. There's lots of different types of activism, isn't there, as well as that. Loads of different types of activism in lots of different ways. So I guess I bring my truth-telling and activism into my coaching in terms of, for example, being very clear and transparent about my beliefs and about my activism, not in trying to push an agenda, but just being honest and open. And that allows, I think it cuts through to a different level of honesty with my clients, and more, you know, there aren't that many people around now who don't get the fact that this is a major existential issue to one degree or another. So actually being upfront about it in an honest, truth-telling way from an early stage, I think helps and allows clients to actually speak their truth a bit and name their concerns, even if that doesn't end up being the main focus of the coaching. You know, because I've chosen in my coaching has chosen a different path from Charly, which is why it's quite good to compare and contrast, because there isn't a single path. So I don't specifically focus on coaching people who are in the sustainability world. If they are, that's great, but it's not my specific focus. In fact, I've kind of, I would say, focused back into my public service clients mainly, which is where my background is. But having worked with lots of clients in different sectors, I think I've refocused back into public service. And there's lots of things that we can do there to blending our skills, but everyone's client group, everyone's focus is going to be different. But it is, for me, it's about connecting that purpose, passions, skills. What is your own personal truth? How can you use that to make a difference in any myriad of ways? If you are involved or want to be involved in that kind of, volunteer or activism work, of course, there's an amazing way that we can bring our coaching and our coaching skills and our coaching self to help those agendas. In whether that's local movements, national movements, global movements, they all benefit from the coaching and facilitation and engagement and connective abilities that we have as coaches. There's a wealth of difference that we can make there. It doesn't mean that we have to do everything in this agenda for free, by the way, at all. But there's we can show up in a lot of different ways and make a difference. Also, if some of you are also in the leadership development and OD sphere as well as coaching, because obviously a lot of us do wear different hats, and then we can certainly bring this agenda into those areas as well. That there's no, it's not just about coaching; it's about that whole range. So, for example, I was asked, which was really lovely actually, I was asked by an organisation that I work with as an associate. They asked me to run a session on sustainability with 200 graduate alumni in a large organisation, which was just a gift, it's just an absolute gift. And I think that just came out of the fact that, a bit like Charly said, kind of, we name it and we put it out there, and the universe responds, doesn't it? Responds in different ways. So for me, that kind of thing is a gift, and just makes my heart sing, really, because it's all about truth. For me, it's truth telling to the maximum number of people possible to make the biggest impact possible, and also then combining that with the coaching skills, not just because I do like and get my head around the science piece, but it's also combining that with the psychological and behavioural change knowledge and understanding, and the truth telling and the authenticity, and bringing all of that in so that we can bring all of myself to try to make the difference, so that we can show up in a lot of different ways to do that. So all of our journeys can be really, really different and unique. I'm noticing there's a few different things coming up in the chat. Please, if you do have links you want to share or questions you have, etc., do feel free to put them in the chat. So what we wanted to do now is to offer you all the opportunity to get into small groups of, say, 3 or 4 in breakouts, for you to reflect on your own journey. What's the journey that's brought you to here and to be engaged in coming to this webinar? And then, what do you see as some of the next steps on your climate and coaching journey from today? Because, what we know from the science and the reality is this is the rest of our lives now. it's, you know, it's a journey that we're all going on forever in order to support the next generation and beyond. So we have, in some ways, it's incredibly urgent and massive, but in some ways it's also, we've got lots of time to think about it because we have got the rest of our lives. So let's use an opportunity to start thinking. Okay, just checking if anyone has a question or clarification they'd like to ask now as a sort of urgent thing before we go into the breakouts. Otherwise, we'll head off into breakouts. I'm seeing some. Thank you for shaking your head, Catherine. That's very helpful clarification that you haven't got anything to ask. Thank you very much. Oh, I've got a couple of questions, and please can you talk about some of the tools that we use. We probably, to be totally honest, we probably won't so much in this webinar. We'll come on to, we might come on to that more. We'll hope to come on to that more when Linda and I do the next one in June. That's going to be more toolsy and concrete kind of stuff. We'll come back to those.
One thing I would say about the tools piece is maybe less tools and more problems would be think about the impact of scarcity and overwhelm in this space, because I think that whatever tools you're using with scarcity and overwhelm right now, those are the really big mindsets we need to shift or want to shift in ourselves and in others around this, whether we are good enough, know enough, have enough time, are there enough people doing stuff? There's too many places to start, I don't know what to do. So really start to think to yourself, what are the tools I use right now? And how can I apply those? Because really in a lot of cases, we're not, like I said, there's these two big fears from which lots of other fears spring. We're not really inventing coaching skills. We're working out how they apply in this context. So you've already got the tools. It's just a question of thinking, so how would I apply them? And digging into that. And I would also, just to add to that, say that there's sort of two things that we want to be in balance. And this is just kind of coaching 101. This is not climate coaching, which is a balance between thinking and feeling. And often we are, or doing and being, and often we are really focused on doing and thinking as society. And when we can get back into a balance with feeling, not that we prioritize suddenly feeling, but that we balance it, then that gives us the ability to be with things like uncertainty, which is really super important right now in coronavirus. So again, what tools do you already have that help you balance clients between thinking and feeling? Whether that's embodiment or metaphor or asking them what their heart's thinking, whatever those tools are, they'll be really useful here too.
That's a really lovely point, points there, Charlie. I really appreciate that. I guess just a little coda I'd sort of add on the end from a different sort of perspective to complement is thinking about the lens of the 9 domains in my climate conscious coach model. The first one being about self, which kind of in some ways speaks to what you're saying about we've got ourselves, we've got a lot already, and how can we apply that? And also that, for me in there's also the kind of educational piece. So in terms of things like overwhelm and scarcity, I think some of this, particularly scarcity, comes from the wider cultural, social, economic context that we've all been brought up in. And, the fish can't feel the water it's swimming in. So we've been told since we were kids that everything has to be like it has to be, and there has to be austerity, and there has to be scarcity, and we have to compete. We don't. Most of them are political choices. And there's an awful lot we can learn. And if we want to get more and more into this area, it really helps us to learn. So, for example, I had the absolute privilege of facilitating a webinar on universal basic income with a group of incredible global experts on Friday, which was utterly amazing and inspiring. And I learned a lot in the process. And it really stretched my brain out to thinking, actually, this is completely possible, and it could be utterly paradigm shifting. So I think I just invited, as well as the coaching tools, think about stretching our brains in the whole field and big picture, because then our own mental models of where our clients might think and where our clients might go our space can be bigger because we aren't limited by our own frame of reference.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. I think every coach I've ever met has a desire for learning / possibly nosiness in my case, and so lean into that desire for learning. I completely agree.
Yeah, beautifully put. Thank you. So without further ado, let's go into breakout, if that's all right, Sarah, if you wouldn't mind doing your wonderful thing. I think we're having 3s and 4s for, it'll be about 15 minutes, if that's okay. And then we'll come back just to give, so in terms of the focus, it's thinking about, as we said, have the conversation you want to have about the journey that's brought you to this point, and what are some of the steps that you think you might want to take going forward, linking your journey to the climate agenda. Where are you motivated to go, and what steps might you take? Over to you, have wonderful conversations, and we'll see you back for a wrap up at the end. If we maybe just take a few seconds of individual reflection time, and just reflect on, perhaps if you want to write yourself a little quick journal note, or if you'd like, it'd be great if you'd be happy to share your reflection in the chat. So what's coming up for you? We'll just literally take a minute to do that, and then we'll have any kind of verbal reflections and comments before we come to a close. That would be wonderful. Thank you.
Hi, this is Tim. I'm happy to give an initial reflection. I think we mentioned, well, in our little breakout group, we gave our experiences, and I think the common thread was for all of us, which I guess is the same for everyone here, is we're feeling the pressures that are out there around climate change and everything, and that we all in our own way are looking to find a way that we can contribute meaningfully. You know, that's kind of defined by each of our own realities and connections and networks and what have you. And some of us are kind of at the beginning of that journey, and it's a case of, you know, working out and taking that step a bit like Charly did, by putting Climate Coach in her name and her email. You know, it's kind of finding the direction, but also having the courage to do so.
Thank you, Tim. Really appreciate that. Yeah, I think it does take courage, doesn't it? Or it feels like it does. Whether it does or not, it feels like it does. Feel free if you'd like to add in comment reflections in the chat, or whether you'd like to, or just silently reflect is fine too, or whether you'd like to say something, do wave or just speak up. I'm going to put my email in the chat in case anyone wants to follow up, make a connection. Do please follow me on LinkedIn, because I post every day. So if you look me up on there as well, that'd be cool. Thanks, Charly. Charly just added your email as well. Any other reflections you'd like to share on your conversation? Jamie?
Yeah, I guess we both, Nadine and I, probably come from a similar kind of professional services background. So I guess one of the things that was coming through for us was, I guess, kind of probably wasn't the case kind of 5-10 years ago, but almost being in a kind of place where you can kind of say your truth and you can speak out. And I think kind of that story, and I think certainly where I live in Bristol and other locations like that, it feels like it's kind of okay now, and there's enough of a groundswell of opinion, both in terms, I guess, the kind of the positive story and the narrative around it, but also in terms of, I guess, there are a number of options just in terms of how people can shop locally and all these sorts of things, that actually people can very easily now go from that kind of I'm concerned to here's something I can do about it. So I guess going back to some of the points that kind of you both made earlier, and being able to take those steps from kind of thoughts to actions, actually it requires that kind of that story that you can be part of, but also kind of those kind of immediate kind of options that I think are there now in a way they weren't probably 5 years ago.
Yeah,
probably helps all the journeys.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Jamie. As the overall conversation shifts, it enables us to further shift the conversation, doesn't it? And I would just I meant to mention this. If anyone has seen or would like a book to read and a book recommendation, I definitely recommend this one. if you have, it's Christiana Figueres is the lady who led the negotiation of the Paris Agreement 2015. Came out earlier this year. I've nearly finished it, and there's some good stuff in there, particularly about mindset and actions. And it's good to see Christiana, or her and her colleague who wrote the book, emphasise some of the same kind of point that I often emphasise in my own conversations, is around, think about what you can do, and then think about what more you can do, and then think about what more you can do, and just keep going, basically, because we need to do lots.
I think that's based on quite an interesting part. They do a podcast, which is quite interesting. So the guy who did it was a guy called Tom, who used to work at the in central government here. So and that's called Outrage and Optimism, and they get some really great guests. Yes. So it's a really good thing for people to kind of look up if they have opportunity in lockdown.
Thanks, Jen. Philip Karnak also used to be a Buddhist monk.
He did, yeah.
A really interesting perspective. Yeah.
Yeah, they interviewed a Buddhist monk on it at one point.
Thanks, Jamie.
Hi, it's Nadine. I was in the group with Jamie. Sorry, I don't have my video on, but I have a weak connection. I just want to say this. One of my reflections was I'm very new to coaching formally, as it were. I'm on a program at Sheffield Hallam, MSc Coaching and Mentoring. And so at the moment I'm doing a lot of work, a lot of reflection on my coaching identity and who I am and who I might want to be, and working through that. And I have never thought about coaching and climate change. In fact, I'm always trolling the EMCC websites, and so if I see something that looks of interest, my curiosity tells me that I need to find out more about it. I am interested in climate change, as we all should be, but I've just found this really useful. I've not thought about this in a coaching context. I think about it in a life context all the time. And you were talking a little bit about overwhelm, etc. And some of the things that Jamie and I were talking about was how small changes, and how you can talk to people about small changes which can relieve some of that overwhelm. And it's just talking about little things here in the Caribbean where I'm at the moment, just the little things like not seeing any plastic shopping bags. Everybody's got a reusable bag. Those are small things that can then encourage people to make a small difference, make a medium-sized difference, make a bigger difference. I think those are things that we can talk people through in coaching. And so I really appreciated what you just said about just sort of that time to think way of thinking about what more is there, what more can we do. And I wonder sometimes, I don't sometimes keep asking myself enough of what else is there, so I need to do that. So that's my reflection, so thanks very much for that.
Oh, thank you, Nadine. Thank you for sharing that. Really appreciate it.
I think there's something in there about, I remember meeting the head of climate outreach because they're down the road in Oxford, and he said, the problem is that people do a bit and then they stop. They turn the washing machine down to 30 and they flick the lights off, and then they sort of stop. And we've got to keep moving. And I think part of maybe if we use coronavirus as a model and overlay it onto climate, how do you feel when you troll the BBC website and you read all the bad news stories and you read the people who are breaking lockdown, and it starts to knock that sense that we're all doing it together, that we together can pull it off. And then when we go into those individual acts, like taking the next door neighbour a casserole or whatever it is we're doing, we start to re-scaffold that feeling of it's possible to do something good here. And so there's a kind of bridge between those individual actions and the kind of believing in the collective ability. So finding a tribe or a network or places that you get that good news are really important. I think what's interesting for me with coronavirus is seeing the news media almost censoring itself and trying to be more positive about coronavirus in order to keep people doing what the kind of the collective rules are, if you like, around lockdown particularly. I just want to say, if anybody wants to join a community, we have a very fledgling community in Facebook. We have a closed group, and there is the address, I think. Ask to join it and we'll let you in. It's closed so that there's not loads of trolls and bots and stuff like that. And it's just coaches from all over the world talking about how they're going to work out how to be a coach in a climate context. And everyone's welcome to join it.
Oh, thanks, Charlie.
Can I just add on the post that Charlie was making just now about COVID? One of the things I mentioned in our group was I'm doing a lot of webinars, support webinars for various communities, one of them being EMCC. We do it every week, and it's very well attended from all over the world. We get 150, 200 people on it. And although some people are worried about the job market and their future professional prospects, everybody is talking about the major things about togetherness, making a difference, creating a better world, and all of that. So that speaks to me about opportunities of where we are now, which is very different to where we were at 3 months ago. At the same time, I think there is a threat, and the threat comes that the post this period is going to be, in terms of global wealth and individual countries' wealth, is going to be poorer world. There'll be much more debt carried over. So for me, climate issue, the same as inclusion, the same as values, the same as fairness, the same as social equality, is a matter of democracy, is a matter of politics, a matter of individual responsibility. All of them come together. And I think it's up to us, really, as active citizens. We don't have to be active climatists to do that, active citizens, to make sure that issue of climate, the same as issue of domestic violence, the same as issue, all the other issues, that what this COVID has now shown is, is put a light on our fault lines as world communities. Those don't get forgotten about.
I completely agree. I'm so sorry to cut you off there, sweetheart. We have gone over time, and we're going to get cut off as a whole shortly, because we're time limited on this webinar. So I wholeheartedly agree with you. And there are so many fronts in which we can educate ourselves and take action, both as coaches and as citizens. I totally agree, and I'm so sorry for cutting you off mid-flow. I do apologise. Just to say thank you so much, everyone, for coming. Charlie and I have put a number of links in the chat. If you want to save the chat in the bottom right-hand corner with the 3 dots, you probably know how to do that. I've put a link to a LinkedIn group on Coaches Declare Climate Emergency. There's a LinkedIn group there, which you're welcome to join. I've also put a link to the Climate Coaching Alliance. If you haven't yet joined the Climate Coaching Alliance, of which I was a founding member, not founder, but founding member. So please do join the Climate Coaching Alliance, and there's a lot of resources developing there as well. And hopefully you may be able to join us for the June and July session with co-presenters, and we'll look forward to seeing you then. Do connect separately, and hopefully we can keep the conversation going. Thank you so much. Thank you, Charlie. Thank you, Natalia. Thank you, Sarah. Thank you, everyone. Have a good week. Take care.